As a single parent, you kind of rise to the occasion.
She was someone who was willing to put in that work.
She was determined to succeed.
All she needed was the right person by her side.
This is a man who's mature.
He had his own business.
He was someone that she could build a relationship with.
Until it all came undone.
The victim suffered a gunshot wound to the head.
We usually call that an execution style.
It's a very violent individual who did it.
Can the police find her killer?
There are so many frustrations.
Your chances get slimmer each passing hour.
If you don't have any evidence, then there's nowhere to go.
Or are they in for a long, cold wait?
You never know where that next piece of evidence can come from.
Lives change when guilt kicks in.
All those years, you could have picked up the phone.
July 15th, 2006. It's early Saturday morning in Long Beach, California, an oceanfront city of almost 500,000.
Long Beach is the best of both worlds because it's got that city vibe, but then it's got some really nice beach areas and restaurants and some great tourist spots.
It also has some spots that aren't on any tourist's itinerary.
You've got a lot of industrial area around there, but it's got this character of blue-collar, working class.
You have this underbelly, you have all these socioeconomic issues.
There is a, we'll say, seedy side with gangs and drugs and violence.
And as the sun comes up that morning, it shines a harsh light on Long Beach's unsavory side.
Are you okay?
The person that was jogging outside had noticed a woman's body on the ground.
But when he moves closer, the man realizes the woman isn't okay.
Oh, God.
The victim suffered a gunshot wound to the head.
The man who found her called 911. And when first responders arrived on the scene, they confirmed that she was dead.
But it's not until homicide detectives arrive on the scene that police are able to determine the dead woman's name.
She didn't have her ID on her.
We checked the missing persons cases.
And they find one in the vicinity that has just been reported.
The missing persons report matches the physical description of their victim.
The missing woman is 20-year-old Tyquisha Myers. Tyquisha Myers had grown up in Las Vegas, surrounded by a loving family.
She was very trusting. She seemed like she was always looking out for the best in people.
However, her life wasn't without challenges.
Tyquisha got pregnant at 14.
The child's father wasn't in the picture, but still, Tyquisha wanted to have the baby.
Being 14 and having a newborn baby and being a single parent, all of those were the odds kind of stacked up against her. You're focused on just trying to build friendships, build connection, learn who you are. And now you're thrust into parenthood to now begin to turn your focus onto this child. And not really knowing how to parent because she was just a child herself. That was a very challenging time for her.
But Tyquisha rose to the challenge by throwing herself fully into motherhood.
She was determined to do better and not just succumb to what she was experiencing. Because as a single parent, you kind of rise to the occasion and try to learn and do all the things so that you can succeed.
But there was still something missing.
She wanted a father figure in her son's life, someone to make their family complete.
And when her son was 6 years old, she found him, a man named Carl Mays.
Carl wished her off her feet.
The relationship moved fast.
Because it had to.
Well, I'm only gonna be in town for a couple more days.
Really? Carl was only in Las Vegas for fun. He lived in Long Beach.
Got a shop out there, barber shop.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
This is a man who's mature, who's situated and has some type of foundation, who has his own business.
The black barbershop is a huge part of the community. You can pretty much feel the pulse of the community, and usually the head barber knows everybody or everything about what's going on.
Carl also represented a huge opportunity for Tyquisha.
He was someone that she could build a relationship with and provide a father figure for her son. So it's like a lot of hopes and dreams that she kind of all had bottled up into this package called Carl.
Maybe I can come to Long Beach and visit you sometime?
Oh, I like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Tyquisha made several trips to see Carl in California.
That really excited her, the possibility for what she and her son could experience in moving here to Long Beach.
We're right by the ocean. We're chilling, we're vibing.
And by the beginning of 2006, Tyquisha had made California her home.
Carl asked Tyquisha to marry him, and she said yes.
It's just like, yes, let's jump into it. She's lived with her parents for such a long time. So now she's just wanting to break free and just make her own decisions, choose whatever it is that she wants to choose and have this freedom.
She was someone with so much future ahead of her.
But now it appears that Tyquisha will never have the opportunity to embrace that future.
Police get a radio call of someone reporting that the person was lying injured on the trail from a single gunshot wound.
The detectives respond to the crime scene, and then a crime scene is established where the victim or where the body was found.
The yellow tape goes up. No one's allowed to come close so that the forensic technicians can start taking pictures.
Tyquisha had been reported missing the day before by her husband. But does that mean he's off the hook?
You have a female that's murdered and dumped on the side of the freeway.
A gunshot wound to the head means it's personal.
We were all saying it's a really angry spouse that might have done it.
A new chapter in her life.
She's lived with her parents for such a long time. She's wanting to venture out and start her own family.
She and her 6-year-old son were in the process of moving to Long Beach, California.
But she wouldn't be in Long Beach alone. Just a few months earlier, she'd met and married 28-year-old Carl Mays.
Carl ran his own barbershop in Long Beach.
Seeing this as an opportunity to just have this love and acceptance and have the support of a male figure who is mature, who is established, who has a job, and who seems to be self-sufficient.
Only now, Tyquisha's new beginning has come to a violent end.
Soon after Carl reported her missing, Tyquisha was found alongside a bike path, dead from a single gunshot wound to the head.
When you have a gunshot wound to the head, usually we call that an execution-style murder.
Somebody was pissed off, or it's a very violent individual who did it.
But who was it that pulled the trigger?
Based on how this crime occurred, just the nature of it, you're gonna look for that maybe heat of passion suspect.
Leaving CSI and the coroner's team to finish processing the scene and remove the body for autopsy, the detectives decide it's time they talk to Tyquisha's husband, Carl.
The husband, the boyfriend, they're the first people you go to. Could it have been somebody else? Absolutely. But that's the first place you look.
From the scene, the detectives drive straight to Carl's barbershop.
Carl had provided his address to police when he filed the missing persons report.
May I help you?
Yes. We're looking for Carl Mays.
Yes. Y'all find Tyquisha?
I'm afraid so.
Carl appears stunned by the news that Tyquisha is dead.
I can't believe it. I mean, I was worried, but just never imagined something like this.
Sir, when's the last time you saw your wife?
Yesterday before she went out of town.
Carl explained that Tyquisha had been splitting her time between Long Beach and with her family in Vegas.
Why is that?
We were just working on some things.
What kind of things?
Married life, mostly.
After living her entire life at home, he says Tyquisha was having a hard time adjusting.
What to expect, what's expected of her, what to expect of others, all of that is something new that she possibly wasn't aware of because she was just 20 years old.
Carl said that Tyquisha had left her son with family in Vegas to come to Long Beach so that they could talk things over.
And she had dropped by the shop on her way back to Vegas.
Carl said she wanted some money that he owed her.
Did you give her the money?
Yeah, then she left. That was the last time I saw her.
Carl says he'd assumed Tyquisha had gone back to Las Vegas until he got a frantic call from her mother.
Her mama hadn't even heard from her, and nobody knew where she was, and it just didn't make any sense. So that's why I called the police.
To the detectives, Carl seems genuine, but they still need to rule him out.
Sir, do you own a gun?
No, I don't.
Do you mind if we look around a little bit?
Yeah, sure, whatever you need that helps.
He seemed more than willing to cooperate with the investigation.
With Carl's permission, detectives search the shop, including the back room.
There's no evidence of a gun.
But they do find something interesting.
This yours?
Yeah.
There's blood on it.
He said that the blood was there because he cut himself while he was working.
It seems plausible, but detectives want to make sure.
Do you mind if we take it with us?
Yeah, we'd like to run some tests.
Yeah, sure.
I'll bag it and take it to the cruiser.
Then, after talking to Carl, detectives talk to the other barber who works in the shop, a man named Harris Finley.
They start by asking him about Carl and Tyquisha's relationship.
When I think of a barber in a community like Long Beach, I think about a place where people are gonna talk about their lives and talk about their stories. Maybe there's a lot of joking, but maybe there's a lot of complaining.
Their instincts are right. Carl had told Harris a lot about his marriage.
He said they hit a rough patch, but they're putting things back together.
Did he say what the problem was?
Mostly that they got married too fast.
Harris also tells them he was at the barber shop when Tyquisha came by to see Carl.
Do you know what it was about?
I think she wanted some money.
He said they went in the back and talked a while. And when they came out, Carl handed Tyquisha some cash.
Call me when you get to Vegas.
Oh. He said she was only here for a few moments and she left, which backed up what Carl was sharing.
As a general rule, that's good evidence to rule that person out as a suspect.
The investigators were back at square one.
Detectives investigating Tyquisha Myers' murder have all but ruled out her husband, Carl Mays.
When they interviewed the barber that worked in the shop with Carl, he backed up what Carl was sharing.
So he gave her the money and she left.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what Carl had told them in his statement.
But the next morning, when detectives received the results of the autopsy, the findings indicate that the murder must have occurred soon after she left the shop.
The medical examiner places Tyquisha's time of death on the afternoon of the 14th.
To determine where she'd gone after she left the barber shop, the detectives subpoena Tyquisha's phone records.
Phone evidence, and it's probably a lot better now, but in 2006, you could actually track someone by their phone.
Then, while waiting for Tyquisha's cell provider to respond to the subpoena, detectives reach out to her family in Las Vegas.
When they do, they learn that Tyquisha's mother is already in Long Beach.
After informing Tyquisha's mother that her daughter is dead, they arrange for her to come into the station and give them a statement.
First off, I want to say sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Assume you drove in from Las Vegas as soon as you realized she was missing.
No, I was already in town.
Tyquisha's mom said she and Tyquisha had been in the area for a few days prior to her disappearance.
She came back to attend a friend's funeral, but she still had issues with Carl that she had to settle.
What sort of issues?
Well, I think he owed her money.
Her statement echoes Carl's. However, Tyquisha's mom does add some new information about the day her daughter disappeared.
Tyquisha's mom dropped her off at the barbershop.
And she left with you?
No. She said she didn't know how long she would be.
She stated that Tyquisha was planning to see another friend in Long Beach after she left Carl's.
She said she would either get a ride with them or Carl would take her.
That was the last time she heard from her daughter.
Tyquisha's mother says she first realized something was wrong when Tyquisha wouldn't answer her phone.
I can just imagine trying to call and do all the checking to see what happened to her and not able to find her.
Tyquisha never answered. But the following morning, she'd gotten a hold of Carl.
She's not answering the phone?
No.
Okay, I can call the police.
To be honest, I was surprised that Carl offered.
Why is that?
Tyquisha and Carl were in this relationship where it didn't seem like it was going very well. They had some personal disputes.
Carl mentioned their issues when detectives spoke with him, but according to Tyquisha's mother, he hadn't told them the whole story.
The first time she came home after the wedding, I could tell there was trouble.
Her family says that she would show up with a lot of bruises.
They knew something was happening.
The mother wanted to put a stop to the relationship immediately.
But she says that Tyquisha denied the abuse, at least initially.
She said she fell or something. She always had an excuse.
It can be very hard for victims of domestic violence to come forth and be honest about what's happening to them. There can be a lot of embarrassment.
Eventually, Tyquisha had finally opened up and admitted the truth.
Tyquisha told her mother that Carl would sometimes lose his temper and get violent with her.
And Tyquisha's family finally convinced her to break things off, at least temporarily.
Tyquisha made the decision, from the support of her family and friends, to be able to put a pause on that relationship because she knew she deserved better.
She took her son and moved back to Las Vegas.
She made up her mind she was never going back to him.
So why'd she come back to see him then?
She just wanted the money he owed her.
She said that was supposed to be Tyquisha's last contact with Carl.
Had that final meetup cost Tyquisha her life? Or are the detectives missing something?
All you kind of have is Tyquisha's mother's word versus Carl's word.
He said she left.
And the other barber corroborated his story.
They're lying, both of them.
And according to Tyquisha's mom, she has proof.
She said that she was gonna give this to him, but she decided not to.
She had left a letter behind.
The note kind of details how hard life has been for her ever since she met Maze. One particular part details how it was a very controlling relationship.
But that wasn't all she said.
She actually indicated that she did not want to be around him and that she was happy to leave him.
She felt like she needed to escape.
The last thing that she wrote was that I was scared for my life.
For emotional and physical abuse.
It's all detailed in a letter that Tyquisha's mother provided to detectives.
That note is a huge piece of evidence to paint a picture of their relationship.
And the last line of the letter all but names Carl as her killer.
Tyquisha closed the letter by stating, "I was scared for my life."
As an investigator, it really focuses your efforts into closing in on this person.
However, there's something standing between the detectives and an arrest. Carl's fellow barber, Harris Finley.
Harris told detectives that he was in the barbershop when Tyquisha dropped by.
He says that Carl gave her the money he owed her, and she left.
But now that they've read the letter she wrote, detectives aren't so sure.
Harris may have had reason to lie, too.
Carl was his employer, and so the reality is you're not going to mess up the way that you feed yourself or feed your family.
Harris could even be protecting himself.
If Carl had killed Tyquisha, maybe Harris helped get rid of the body.
There's suspicion of Carl mounting. Detectives do a little digging on Tyquisha's husband.
They're looking for previous crimes, any other history of domestic violence, restraining orders, things like that.
There's nothing in Carl's record as far as domestic violence or restraining order. But the search does reveal something.
The year before, he was arrested for having a loaded firearm on his possession in public.
Tyquisha died from a single gunshot wound to the head.
But while the weapons charge raises detective suspicions, it's a long way from a murder charge.
The weapons charge only proved that he used to own a gun, not that he had one now. And the search of the barbershop hadn't produced any evidence of a gun either.
However, the detectives hope that one piece of evidence from the barbershop could be the breakthrough they need.
The investigators found a blanket that had blood on it.
At the time, Carl said the blood was his, but the detectives wanted to be sure.
They took it in for DNA.
The test results proved disappointing.
It came back as unconclusive.
Back in 2006, the technology just wasn't as refined as it is now.
But when detectives received Tyquisha's phone records, they further suggest that the murder did occur in the barbershop.
Cell phone records showed that was her last known location.
After that, there was no activity on Tyquisha's phone.
But the phone records alone aren't enough for an arrest.
There are so many frustrations because in your mind, you know that this is the person that most likely did this, but because of the lack of evidence, it's not a fileable case.
What detectives need is a confession.
The detectives brought Carl back in for questioning and confronted him with what Tyquisha's family said about the alleged abuse.
Any truth to that?
I mean, we could argue some.
But no violence?
I mean, some pushing and shoving, maybe. Her just as much as me, but no.
Carl also insists that things weren't over between them.
We were just taking a break for a little bit.
That's not what her family says.
Well, maybe she didn't tell her family everything.
He also insisted that Tyquisha left the barbershop alive, and that was the last contact that he ever had with her.
Harris was there. He saw her leave.
We know.
He maintains that he has nothing to hide.
He also gives the detectives permission to search his car.
Since she was found several miles from the barbershop, the detectives suspected that Carl may have used his car to move Tyquisha's body.
The search fails to turn up any blood or other evidence. And following up with Carl's co-worker, Harris Finley, is equally fruitless.
He maintains that Tyquisha left the shop alive.
It's very frustrating for detectives.
Unable to make an arrest, the case grows cold.
If you don't have any other leads, then there's nowhere to go.
It is extremely, extremely frustrating, and everybody feels for the family.
It's very hard on families. A lot of times, they don't understand what is really happening.
You feel like it's never going to be solved.
The frustrations only get worse as weeks turn to months and months into years.
It's a very, very challenging time for the family. They're trying to do the best that they can, trying to raise her son and just not having the answers.
However, the case is never officially closed.
You gotta have faith that somebody will find something and somebody will be put to justice.
When homicide cases go cold, it can give people time to think. Witnesses even suspects. Lives change, their conscience gets the best of them, and guilt kicks in.
Or they can get caught in a jam and need a little leverage.
Homicide.
In 2019, 13 years after Tyquisha's murder, Long Beach detectives get a call from a neighboring precinct.
They'd arrested a man on other charges, and when they started questioning him, he said that he had information to give them.
The man they had in custody was Carl's friend, Harris
Myers, and dumped her body along a bike path in Long Beach, California. And investigators have never made an arrest.
As long as the suspect is out there running free, the case stays open.
But now, detectives may have finally caught a break when Harris Finley is arrested on an unrelated charge.
13 years earlier, Harris had provided an alibi for Tyquisha's husband, Carl Mays.
Out of the blue, Harris had started talking about Tyquisha's murder.
Harris be like, hey, well, if I tell you this, would it potentially reduce my charges?
When police hear what Harris has to say, they reach out to the Long Beach detectives, who are anxious to talk to Carl's old co-worker.
When a witness comes forward after years of a case being cold, you take that statement.
Harris is booked on other charges while detectives drive over to interview him.
And this time, he has something very different to tell the detectives.
He said that Tyquisha never left the barber shop.
At least not alive.
Carl killed her.
Did you see him do it?
No, but I know he did it.
According to Harris, when Tyquisha stopped by the shop that day, she wasn't happy.
Where's my money, Carl?
I got it. Settle down, all right?
When Tyquisha enters the barbershop, they kind of start arguing a little bit.
He says Carl took Tyquisha into the back room of the barbershop to talk.
Did you happen to hear what they said?
Not really.
However, he says there was no mistaking what he heard next.
You're sure it was a gunshot?
Yeah.
Harris said that Carl came out of the back room a few minutes later.
What happened, man?
It was an accident. I didn't mean to do it.
Carl said that he tried to put the gun to her head, kind of to scare her.
He had no intention to take the shot, yet the gun went off.
Should we call the police?
No.
Carl said if anybody comes around asking any questions, you didn't hear anything, you didn't see anything, nothing happened.
Harris admits he'd done what Carl asked.
Why is that?
Because he had just killed someone.
We're talking about a witness that was in fear for his life.
But had that fear bought more than his silence?
You help him move the body?
Nah, man. I had nothing to do with any of that.
Detectives aren't sure if they believe him, but Harris's statement gives them the piece that they've been missing.
The witness statement matches the victim's injuries, matches how it could have happened. It matches the phone data. So everything is tied together.
But after 13 years of silence, can detectives believe him?
Oftentimes, suspects are just making things up, and clearly he has a motive to get out of whatever he was arrested for.
All those years, you could have gone to the police, you could have picked up the phone and made an anonymous tip, and you didn't. And the only time you decide to come up with this statement is when you're looking at potential incarceration.
Whether Harris is telling the truth or not, what to do with his new story isn't the detective's call.
You take that statement, and then as a detective, you give that information to the district attorney, and the DA is the one that has to convince the jury that what the witness is saying is true.
The prosecutors are open to cutting Harris a deal, but they're going to need something in return.
When somebody comes forward with this type of information, they're going to have to go the full length on ensuring that that information is used in the court case, which more than likely will be testifying.
Will his testimony alone be enough to ensure a conviction?
The defense attorney is going to try to discredit your witness.
If the reason he didn't speak 13 years before is because he was afraid for his life, then what changed?
A vulnerability to cross-examination isn't the only weakness in Harris's story either.
That type of information is not the smoking gun in this case. It could help, but it's witness testimony, which tends to be low on the totem pole in terms of evidence.
Luckily, detectives have one more piece of the puzzle.
Back in 2006, the detectives had recovered a blood-stained blanket from the barbershop.
At the time, DNA testing had been unable to determine if the blood was Tyquisha's.
The capabilities of DNA testing have progressed quite a bit over the years.
But will a second round of testing confirm what detectives long suspected?
They ran it, did the test, and they were able to say this blanket had her blood.
That DNA, it actually sealed.
Believe they finally have enough evidence to make an arrest.
DNA testing has determined that the blood on the blanket found in Carl's barbershop belongs to Tyquisha.
And it isn't the only thing detectives have to connect Tyquisha's husband, Carl Mays, to her murder.
Carl's co-worker, Harris Finley, said he heard a gunshot after Carl took Tyquisha into the back room of the barbershop.
The witness statement is actually the icing on the cake.
On September 13th, 2019, detectives finally take Carl Mays into custody. But when they get him into the interview room, he still denies having anything to do with Tyquisha's death.
I'm the one that reported her missing. Why would I do that if I killed her?
Harris said you did it.
He heard the gunshot.
The detectives tell him that his former coworker had changed his story.
He said that he's lying.
And the blood on the blanket? You said it was yours.
And we know that's a lie.
Now backed into a corner, detectives give Carl one more chance to come clean.
Come on, man. Do yourself a favor.
Somebody that's remorseful, or you get somebody that's confessed, that goes a long way.
But Carl is through talking.
No, I need my lawyer.
He asks for a lawyer, effectively ending the interview.
Even without a confession, detectives are able to book Carl on murder charges, and Tyquisha's family rejoices at the news.
It was a lot of crying and releasing of all of the emotion that has been building for those 13 years.
However, for the patrons of Carl's barbershop, the arrest comes as a shock.
When you're going to the barber shop and have a friendly face that you see all the time, you never picture that that person can take a life. And so it must be a scary thing for the community.
And when the case goes to trial, they're still wondering, is Carl a cold-blooded killer?
Once that person steps foot in the courtroom, all eyes are on them.
While Carl looks on from the defense table, the prosecutors lay out the case against him.
Prosecutors have to make sure that, they have enough evidence that the charges that they're presenting are going to stick.
They have the family's allegations of abuse, Tyquisha's phone records that last place her at the barbershop, and they have her blood on the blanket from Carl's storeroom.
They also have a star witness.
Harris Finley takes the stand and testifies that when Tyquisha came by the shop that day, Carl took her into the back room.
He recalls hearing a loud pop in the background and then Carl coming out.
But Tyquisha never came out.
Carl shot and killed her in that back room.
Harris doesn't know exactly why he did it, only that Carl and Tyquisha had been arguing over money.
However, the prosecution believes that money was only part of it.
I need my money, Carl.
If you wanted something from me, you should have stayed.
He could have been holding in some kind of anger or rage.
Until it suddenly and violently came boiling out.
Just give me my money, Carl.
Okay, I'll give you something.
That's when he shot her.
The DNA, the phone records, and Harris's testimony. According to the prosecutors, it all points to Carl as Tyquisha's killer.
Basically, they tied everything together in this neat little bow.
But when it's the defense's turn, Carl's attorney does his best to pull at any loose threads.
As the prosecutors predicted, the defense tried to discredit Harris Finley's testimony.
The defense in this case really focused on that.
May's attorney brought up how convenient it was for this guy who was facing charges for something unrelated to now bring up this murder 13 years later.
All the while, according to the defense, Tyquisha's real killer walked free.
What May's attorney was essentially trying to argue was that police dropped the ball again and again. They weren't diligent enough to go and find who actually did this.
When the case goes to the jury, they find Carl guilty of second-degree murder.
The reason you get second degree instead of first degree is because they just couldn't prove intent.
It might have been an intentional killing, but it might have been more in the heat of the moment.
The DA's office works off of the evidence that they can prove in court, and we're lucky they didn't get just manslaughter.
When it comes time for sentencing, the family argues in favor of the maximum sentence.
It's one thing for a crime to be a heat in the moment and you have immediate remorse, but it's another thing to not come forth and be honest about it. So there's a significant amount more of malicious intent.
And Tyquisha's mother had some harsh words for her daughter's killer.
Her mom pointed out that she wasn't gonna forgive him. He took her baby away from her, and that each year that he spends in jail, she hopes that haunts him.
But it's Tyquisha's own words that have the most impact.
Her sister took to the stand and read from the letter Tyquisha wrote to Carl prior to her death.
It was essentially describing in detail why she couldn't bear to continue the relationship with Mays and why she wanted this new life, this new start.
Carl appears unmoved by Tyquisha's words.
When the family was speaking, I don't think Carl really ever showed any remorse.
However, when the judge hands down his sentence, it appears that the family's passionate plea did have an impact.
He gives Carl the maximum sentence, 41 years to life.
Which means he'll be in his late 60s, early 70s, or even in his 80s before he comes up for parole. That's if he survives prison.
When the sentencing was handed down, it's finally over. It's been a long time coming, so there's a sense of relief.
The family also feels a sense of gratitude.
It's sad for the families to have to wait, but as long as that case is solved, then hopefully it gives the family some closure.
But even if Tyquisha finally has justice, her family still grieves her loss. Supposed to be the weekend getaway of a lifetime in the heart of the Lone Star State.
They came to Houston to party and enjoy the nightlife.
He was doing what guys usually do, get girls, have a good time.
But the party's over when a shooting starts.
There were gunshots ringing throughout the neighborhood.
Harris County 911.
I don't know where I'm at, but they shooting. I'm scared.
He's shot multiple times, in the chest, the arm, just everywhere.
This was a very dire situation.
Were these tourists simply victims of bad luck? Or were there more sinister factors at play?
What? I remember just thinking to myself, like, this can't be happening. How? Why? It just didn't make sense.
This person isn't even from the city.
As detectives work to unravel this mystery, they will learn trust is a luxury few can afford.
This was a very toxic situation.
Come on.
I think it's a passion-fueled, jealousy-fueled crime.
We got anybody dead now from a certain type of way. I have no problem. I didn't know any of these people had.
Sometimes it takes a long time to get to the truth, but that's what we did here.
This was a cold, calculated murder.
June 28th, 2021. It's not yet daylight in Houston, Texas, a city that attracts millions of tourists every year to enjoy its sports, restaurants, and world-class nightclubs.
Houston is a large city, and we have a very vibrant nightlife. It is an attraction, especially down in the southwest part of Houston.
If you come to Houston, you're going to be welcomed. You're going to enjoy a lot of great food, a great time, great party atmosphere.
But in the early hours of this Monday morning, the city is suddenly thrown into chaos.
Just around 3 a.m., there was an influx of 911 calls.
Harris County 911. We think we might have just heard gunshots. Oh my God, somebody shooting me. They're still shooting right now? I'm scared. I'm in the back of my car. For sure.
By the sound of the reports, at least one person has already been injured.
Please, I'm welcome. Hurry up, please.
Police race to the scene of the crime, a home in the affluent Houston neighborhood of Old Oaks.
It's a quiet neighborhood. This is unusual to have this type of disturbance.
When officers arrived, they were fully prepared to confront an armed shooter.
But instead, they only find the aftermath of the violent attack.
They see this young man in dire need. He's shot multiple times, in the chest, in the arm, just everywhere.
He's been pummeled with shots. Whomever shot him meant to do intentional and extensive damage, because they did.
It's really bad, yet he's still breathing.
There were some witnesses gathered around, and they were very distraught.
The young man's friends identify him as 28-year-old Gregory Moore.
Gregory Moore was losing blood fast.
They wanted to get him to the nearest hospital so that he could get to the emergency room.
Time was of the essence if they were going to save this man's life.
New York native Gregory Moore's outgoing personality and warm-hearted demeanor meant he had no trouble making friends.
He was a great, great friend. You could never just be mad at him, even when you wanted to be. You know, he just made you laugh. He was funny. He was a goofball.
He was just one of those guys who seemed like he could get along with anyone, always the life of the party.
But Gregory wasn't just the life of the party. He was also a dedicated father.
We had a family young. He was an amazing dad. He was not the disciplinary. He was the fun parent. He was the kind of parent that would be like, it's raining out, don't go to work today, let's stay home and watch movies. Or let's put a bunch of blankets on the floor and let the kids just do what they want.
However, as much as Greg loved his children, the pressures of parenthood put a strain on his relationship with their mother, Tatiana Anderson.
We were together for 10 years, so time took its course on our relationship, and we kind of had to separate to figure ourselves out.
Greg started to date other people and had a child with another woman in 2018.
By the summer of 2021, Greg was focused on being the best parent he could be and building his career.
He used to work the night shift. He was a community technician, so he was on the front line with the population that is undeserved the most. He had gotten to a place where he didn't know if that was something he wanted to continue to pursue. So he was thinking of going to trade school and just trying to build from that. He was talking about opening a business.
And in June of that year, Gregory decided to take a well-deserved break from the stresses of life by planning a trip with his closest friends.
Gregory and his friends came down to Houston to have a good time, have a boys' weekend, and just enjoy themselves.
They rent a high-end rental in Houston, Texas, and prepare for a few days of R&R and social get-down.
But instead of enjoying a weekend savoring the sights and sounds of a new city, the group's dream vacation has just become a waking nightmare.
Police responded to a string of 911 calls and found Gregory Moore unresponsive and losing blood fast.
He has multiple gunshots, including his neck, his back, his arms, his chest.
His carotid artery was severed. His lung was punctured. Just horrible injuries.
He's clinging to life and barely has a pulse.
Paramedics rush Gregory to the nearest hospital, hoping for a miracle.
His life essentially at this moment is hanging in the balance.
In the summer of 2021, Brooklyn resident Gregory Moore was enjoying a weekend in Houston with his closest friends.
He's young, black, handsome, trying to be successful, trying to make it.
When Gregory Moore and his friends rented that Airbnb in the suburbs of Houston, they thought that they were going to have a fun, ritzy, exciting weekend.
But just 2 days into their trip, the group's vacation has just turned into a catastrophe.
One of his friends had called me, and he was hysterical. And he was like, Greg has been shot. That's it. Nothing else. I'm hundreds of miles away. I didn't know what to do.
En route to the hospital, first responders discover he's been shot at least 10 times.
For the whole night, I sat on the couch. And I just waited. And me and his mom were texting, and she was like, oh, he was in ICU and he was gonna live.
Meanwhile, as the sun comes up over Houston, homicide detectives arrive on the scene of the shooting to begin their investigation.
When I arrived at the scene, multiple patrol units were already there. They had detained numerous individuals that had been in the home. As I walked up, I observed there be a large amount of blood on the front porch.
On the outskirts of Birmingham, Alabama.
They also saw
Police
shell
make a
casings
grisly discovery.
on the ground from a 9mm.
You've got what looks to be
The front of the house
execution-style
was
murders.
littered with bullets.
That's nuts. That's crazy.
It's so shocking because it shows the rage that the gunman had.
Another contact wound.
It seems that the shooter ambushed the victim, rolled up, shot him, and then left.
The more people I talk to, I'm on my
Near
way.
the front door,
I can figure out
investigators locate Gregory's cell phone.
You could
but
tell
that's
that
not
this
the
was
only
not
phone
your
they
typical
find
homicide.
at the scene.
They find another cell phone and a tablet that
The
looks like it's
detective
been
will
run
follow
over.
one jaw-dropping lead.
They were in the street in front of the house.
This guy Buck is an
It looks like this is some sort of
Uncover the
physical
truth.
evidence from the shooter.
In a brutal,
Unfortunately,
double
the
homicide.
investigators aren't able to access the devices.
These two
It's
additional
almost like giving a
devices
priest
are
a
locked.
confession.
And not only that, the tablet has been damaged.
Extracting
We're on the
all the
west side
digital
of
contents
Jefferson
of the
County,
phones.
Alabama, just
That
outside
takes
of
months.
Birmingham.
The detectives don't have that kind of time to
Jefferson
waste.
County is the most
If you
populous
have an
county in
armed
the
shooter on the
state.
loose, you need answers now.
It has deep
Why would
ties to the
someone
civil
want to
rights
hurt
movement.
Gregory?
These people had just
The
traveled
town we're
here.
in
They
is
were
called
tourists.
Mulga.
Gregory Moore
This is
is
a
not
small,
from Houston,
sleepy
Texas.
hamlet.
He's from New York, and so
It's a
this
rural
doesn't make
area
any sense.
filled with hard-working families.
That's when
This place
detectives
looks
are
a bit
approached
like a
by a
town that
neighbor.
time forgot.
Hey, detectives.
But back in
I have something I think you'll want to
2011,
see.
this very neighborhood will be
The
at
neighbor
heart
had a
of
doorbell
brutal
camera
murder
that
mystery.
picked up some useful footage.
He's able to share the video with
The
Um,
them.
morning of March 5th, 2011,
It's not the
Jefferson
greatest
County
quality of
Sheriff's
video,
Office
but
gets
detectives
multiple
can see the
calls
shooter's
about
vehicle
shots
arrive
fired.
around 3 a.m. And it's a
On the
dark
300
colored
block
sedan.
of First Avenue.
Seconds later, A barrage of gunshots
When deputies
ring
arrive
out.
on scene, they find a black male lying in the middle of the street with an obvious gunshot wound to his head.
As responding officers begin their search of the immediate area and the perimeter.
Recorded the end of this tragic evening.
On the phone video, you can see someone running away from the crime scene.
They jumped into the vehicle and pulled off. However, the cell phone video is too dark to identify exactly who this person is.
They aren't able to make out the vehicle's license plate from the video either.
As compelling as this evidence is, it doesn't do much to help the investigators narrow down their list of suspects.
We had no idea who the person was. Right now, we have to identify this guy.
However, before they can continue their investigation, Detective Crane receives a call from the hospital where Gregory is being treated.
Yes, this is Detective Crane.
They get a call that Gregory Moore has succumbed to his extensive injuries.
Gregory Moore was dead.
Houston detectives investigating the shooting of 28-year-old tourist Gregory Moore have just learned that he succumbed to his injuries.
He was pronounced deceased there at the hospital. It's a tragedy. It's the worst part of my job.
When the news spreads to Gregory's loved ones back in Brooklyn, they're devastated and confused.
And I remember just thinking to myself, like, this can't be happening. Not Greg. How? Why? I think in that moment, the air just left my body. My daughter had just graduated pre-K. And my son was going to kindergarten the following September. And I remember thinking to myself, how was I going to explain to them that he wasn't coming back?
Gregory had flown down to Houston with 3 friends: Raymond Gibbs, Clayton Barnes, and Troy Walsh. And the investigators' next move was to speak to them to see what they knew.
Gregory's friends are distraught when the detectives break the news to them.
Well, here's the deal. Gregory didn't make it, okay? So, we're gonna do what we can to figure out who and why, but it's gonna require some help from y'all, okay?
Gregory's friends are distraught. This was supposed to be a fun weekend in Houston.
They came all this way just to have a good time.
The detectives asked Greg's friends if they have any idea who the shooter was.
Is there anything you can think of that would help us in identifying?
The friends explained they'd only been in Houston for a couple of days.
We got out Saturday around 3 o'clock. They went out Saturday night to have a good time.
Did y'all have any issues with anyone Saturday night?
No, we had no issues. Anyone?
In fact, Gregory's friends say he'd hit it off with someone at the bar that night.
We learned that the victim had met a female at a club the previous night, on Saturday night, the same night they arrived.
My friend met these girls, and I guess we were talking to them, and then I had took one of the girls' number, he took one of the girls' number.
The woman Greg exchanged numbers with was named Stacy, and her friend Michelle exchanged numbers with Clayton.
They were doing what guys usually do: talk to girls, get girls, have a good time for the weekend.
The following night, Greg invited Stacy over to the rental house to keep the party going.
They were all just partying and having a good time. There was some more flirting happening between Greg and Stacy.
And eventually, Stacy suggested that they go pick up Michelle.
My friend wanted to come pretty much to the place, so we're like, okay. Greg asked me if I wanted to drive, and they're gonna come with me. I'm like, cool.
And so they left the Airbnb, traveling back down into Southwest Houston.
But along the way, their plans changed when Michelle decided to stay in for the night.
Her friend decided she wasn't coming anymore. Okay. We're like, all right, cool, whatever.
And that ultimately led to them turning around and driving back up to where the Airbnb was located.
By the time they made it back, Clayton was feeling hungry, so he decided he was going to go pick up something to eat.
Have a good night.
We get back here, and I'm like, y'all not gonna lie, I'm starving. They're like, all right, cool, we're gonna go inside and lay down. Okay. I'm like, that's cool. So I literally like drive in the front to drop them off, and they like walking.
Clayton says as Greg and Stacy approached the front door of the Airbnb, all hell broke loose.
That's when they are ambushed.
I see like a guy just running from the side of the grass, and I see like a little flashing light, and then all I heard was shots going off.
Clayton took cover and dialed 911.
Please, someone from. Hurry up, please.
Everyone knows what happened to Gregory, but where was Stacy?
The kids in the house did not know where the girl had gone. That caused us concern. We don't know who this girl is or what has happened to her.
There is not a last name, unfortunately.
Did she run away? Is she with the perpetrator?
So detectives start exploring all avenues to track Stacy down.
Stacy's friend Michelle was at the club with her the night she met Greg and his friends. Michelle and Clayton had exchanged numbers.
Clayton gives the police Michelle's number.
She agreed to come in and speak with them about this.
Thank you for coming in.
You're welcome.
We obviously want to talk to you about an incident that happened this morning early. And there's no sense in being all around the bush. Tell me what happened.
Michelle starts by confirming that she and her friend, Stacy Adams, went bar hopping on the night of June 27th.
We met some guys from New York.
They find themselves on Saturday night at a club, having a good time. They think, oh, good, we got some people to hang out with.
The next day, which is Sunday, they were texting us like, do we want to come to the hospital?
Stacy was quick to accept the offer, but Michelle says she was more reluctant.
I already was like, no, because now I'm not like that. And I just met them, but she was texting me like, come over here.
At some point, Stacy told Michelle that she and the boys were on their way to pick her up.
I wouldn't answer my phone. I was trying to play like I'm asleep because I didn't want to go.
They ended up continuing the night without her.
But a little while later, Michelle says she heard from Stacy again.
Girl, I told you I'm not coming.
She called her at about 2:45 in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, panicking.
She was like, y'all can't tell on me, And we like, what you talking about? What's wrong?
That's when Stacy dropped a bombshell.
She was telling her, y'all have to alibi me out.
She was like, my dude killed her boyfriend.
What?
Houston police investigating the murder of Gregory Moore had been looking for a young woman named Stacy Adams, who was with Greg during the shooting.
Initially, police were concerned that Stacy could be another victim of the crime, but now they have to consider the possibility she was in on it.
Now, in speaking with Stacy's friend, Michelle, that possibility seems more and more likely.
Michelle admitted her friend Stacy wasn't as single as she presented herself to be.
She indicated she received a very frantic phone call from Stacy, and she let her know that her boyfriend had shot and killed one of the guys they had met clubbing.
She was like, my dude killed her boyfriend.
What? I know, I'm freaking out.
According to Michelle, Stacy went on to explain that her boyfriend James had been spying on her that day.
Stacy's boyfriend found out she was messaging with Gregory. He was not happy about that.
His name James. I don't know his last name. I wish I knew it. He got a toy inside him. He screenshots the messages to her and like, you.
That's also how James found out where Stacy was.
The Instagram app allows you to share your location, so he can literally log into it and see on her locations where she is.
The boyfriend was able to track Stacy to where Gregory and his friends were staying by her social media. And when they get to the house, he jumps out, rolls up on the two of them.
She was like that. Her boyfriend took the with the dude, and he shot him at least like 5 times.
Come with me if you know what's good for you.
After the shots stopped, Stacy did leave the scene with her boyfriend.
Even though Michelle doesn't know James's full name, she's able to provide the investigators with other useful information.
She had a very good idea of where he lived, and through that information, we were able to determine what cars are registered at that address, which came back to matching the car that they fled the scene in.
DMV records show that the vehicle in question is registered to a 21-year-old pizza delivery driver named James Ray Lane.
They pull his driver's license photo and present it to Michelle.
You recognize who this person is?
That's James.
That's James.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, detectives have to wonder if the mysterious second cell phone they found at the crime scene belongs to James Lane.
In an effort to try to put all these pieces together, the detectives ring the phone number that they have for James Ray Lane. And the phone that they found at the house, at the murder scene, begins to ring.
Bingo.
With that, we were clearly able to establish that he was in fact there, and we got to a point where we were comfortable in that James Lane was in fact our suspect. And after we had a warrant for his arrest, then our tactical operations team then began the surveillance.
They start by staking out James's home.
Police set up surveillance. However, after several days, James does not show up and they are not able to locate Stacy either.
Next, the investigators go after their suspect's vehicle.
They learn that his vehicle is leased from a local car lot.
And when detectives contact the car lot, they're met with a shocking piece of information.
The dealership said he's here now. He's here now.
Houston police immediately move in to make the arrest.
Stacy was there with him too.
James was arrested. Stacy was just traveling with him, and she agreed to come to our office and talk to us about what happened.
At police headquarters, the investigators placed James and Stacy into separate interview rooms for questioning.
They decide that Stacy is the first person that they want to talk to.
We might as well jump on off into here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I'm going to tell you a little bit of what I do. The situation you're involved in, the truth is your best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I want you to think about that as we talk about what happened last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair approach?
Yeah.
As Stacy begins to tell her story, it lines up with what the detectives have already heard from other witnesses.
Saturday, I went out to this little bar. We got drunk, and I met some guys.
She and Michelle met the fellas from New York that night at a club.
So we got to exchange numbers.
Yeah.
Stacy also confirms that she'd hung out with Gregory and his friends at their Airbnb the following night.
She admitted to, in fact, being there. She admitted to how she came to know the victim and his friends. But when we got to the real meat and potatoes of the shooting, she had a little different story about it.
This is what gets real important. What happens? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
She shared with us that, hey, she had no idea who the person was. He was masked up.
You do that on the name.
Yeah? Okay. What did he say?
Nothing.
Stacy also denies leaving the scene of the crime with the shooter after he ceased fire.
What happened after the shooting?
I was in shock. When we went our separate ways.
What do you mean with your separate ways?
I know. I went to smoke in the house.
Yeah? Okay. And how did you leave?
We walked. My brain's out, like in that area.
She said she just walked away and went to her grandmother's house, who lived nearby, and then called people to come get her.
The detectives aren't buying it.
If you walk to your grandmother's house, give me your grandmother's name, her phone number, maybe even her address. Let's go talk to her, back up your alibi. But she couldn't.
Detectives also have the cell phone footage from the neighbor, which they believe shows Stacy getting in James's car and leaving with him.
There's also the fact that she told Michelle a very different story than what she's telling detectives now. Her current version of events just doesn't check out.
I just straight confronted her with the fact that that's not true. That part of it is completely fabricated, and we're going to have to do better.
I think so, yeah.
Nope.
Sometimes it takes a long time to get to the truth, but that's what we did here.
Police in Houston, Texas have zeroed in on 21-year-old James Ray Lane as their main suspect in the shooting death of Gregory Moore.
He was jealous. He was upset that his girlfriend, Stacy, might have been cheating on him, and he took it out on someone who didn't even know that she had a boyfriend.
But according to Stacy, James is innocent.
Stacy told the investigators that a man with a black mask shot Gregory Moore.
She said that she didn't know who the gunman was.
The investigators believe she's lying.
I share with her that if I don't believe it, a jury's not ever going to believe it either.
The truth is going to be very important for you right now. I'm sitting here today. I mean, it could either make you a witness, to make you part of the crime, and to make you a suspect. So this is your opportunity to tell us the truth.
I always tell them, we understand sometimes things happen that are out of your control, but we can't make it worse by lying about it.
Finally, Stacy starts to break down.
I think so, yeah.
Nope.
I think so, yeah.
Not at this point.
Sometimes it takes a long time to get to the truth in what we call the little room, but we generally get there. And that's what we did here.
Stacy finally admits on the night she went home with Gregory, her boyfriend James was blowing up her phone.
Everything okay?
Yeah. Yeah, it's fine.
A lot of them on Instagram taking screenshots of my DMs and stuff. I was really ignoring him because I was having fun at that point. I didn't want to argue with him.
Okay.
And he just kept calling and kept texting.
She's getting text messages from James. He's wondering, where are you? Who are you with?
James had gotten into a tablet device that Stacy owned, and that was how he was able to access all her social media, the same tablet police found at the scene of the crime.
But Stacy insists she had no idea James was tracking her location.
I don't know. I believe probably.
Stacy says when James ambushed them outside the Airbnb, she was just as shocked as Gregory.
James was clearly upset and jealous.
He beat on a defenseless man. Greg didn't have a knife. He didn't even have a pot to hit him with. He had nothing.
Why did you not call for an adult?
I was scared. I was still in shock. I'm gonna sing a song too.
Come with me if you know what's good for you.
Stacy was in such shock that she actually did leave with James after the shooting.
I was going to stay with him until the police got there. But I was scared.
She says that James then dropped her off in an area of southwest Houston called Meyerland.
Okay, so you rode with him to Meyerland and just got out of the car on the street in Meyerland?
It is because I have people over here.
She was unsure as to where James went or where the murder weapon was.
But they get together a few days later and decide to lay low at her cousin's house in southwest Houston.
After doing that for a few more days, they make their way to the car dealership, hoping that they can get a new car and drive out of town. And it is at a car dealership that they get busted.
I have enough confidence. I did not end a piece of problem.
But is she telling the truth?
Now the detectives make their way across the hall to talk to James to try to see if their stories will line up.
Houston detectives investigating the murder of Brooklyn native Gregory Moore have just taken a statement from 18-year-old Stacy Adams.
Stacy admitted to her boyfriend, James, being the gunman, but insisted she had no idea of what was going to go down.
Now, detectives are eager to hear James's side of the story.
There was a shooting that occurred, and there was a boy got killed. And I received information, a lot of information, that tells me you may have something to do with that. I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell us what happened.
Much to their surprise, he admits that he was on the scene.
What made you go that night to the house when the shooting happened? That was my team.
But James says after he showed up and found Stacy, the situation quickly got out of hand.
According to James, when he arrived, he told Stacy, "Let's go."
Come on.
I told her, let's go.
What you think you're doing?
Take my girl back home. Get your hands off me.
What do you mean you came at me?
When he indicates Gregory attacked him. He said he did what he needed to do in order to defend himself.
That's why he shot Gregory.
Unfortunately for James, the detectives know he's not being truthful.
James told the police, basically, he felt threatened by Gregory Moore. He had the 9mm. He shot Gregory Moore 10 times, killed a man. And so it's astounding that he would try to shift the blame.
Well, James, let me stop you. Don't start going down a path of lying, all right?
I just lay out to him, these are the facts. This is what we know, and this is your opportunity to tell us what happened.
You're going to have to tell us what happened without some crazy story that doesn't make sense and it's not consistent with the evidence, okay? What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth. Yeah, I'll tell you the truth.
After a little bit of time, he comes around to the most self-serving truth he can get to, and he asked me and my partner, what would you do if you saw someone handling your woman that way? I asked him to elaborate on that, and he wouldn't. But he put himself there, and then he put himself trying to justify the murder. And that was sufficient enough for us.
At the end of the interview, the investigators charged James with the murder of Gregory Moore.
I would like to have had a complete total confession as to why he did it, but that's very hard for a lot of people to do.
Investigators conclude that James's girlfriend, Stacey Adams, was an innocent bystander in the crime.
Detectives do believe that Stacey is telling the truth about not knowing what James was going to do that night.
They ended up not charging her with any crime.
However, as prosecutors prepare for trial, they aren't planning to go easy on James.
Making the decision to drive 40 minutes all the way up to North Harris County and wait, lay in waiting for them to return. It's a passion-fueled, jealousy-fueled, immaturity-fueled crime.
This was not an act of self-defense. This was a cold, calculated murder.
James is now facing life in prison. Having an acquittal just seems highly unlikely.
So he decides to come to the table with the prosecutors to try to strike a deal to save some part of his life.
James finally confesses to investigators' version of events and admits to gunning down Gregory Moore in cold blood.
In exchange for a full confession, they do offer James a deal of 22 years, and he does accept this plea deal.
He's got to serve at least half of that before he can even be considered for parole.
For Gregory Moore's loved ones, the resolution in this case isn't enough.
James got 22 years. 22. In 22 years, James will still be old enough to have a family, to have children, to have a life.
This sentence is quite light, but James is 21 years old and has never so much as gotten a traffic ticket.
It's really heartbreaking because prosecutors even said after the sentencing, he never showed remorse to the victim's family. He never showed that he felt bad for the situation.
Gregory Moore should be alive today, enjoying his kids growing up. James Lane should be in the free world today, doing what kids his age should be doing. And neither one of those things are going to happen now.
Greg didn't have cancer. He wasn't in a car accident. He wasn't hit by a bus. He was shot. And that's a hard pill for me to swallow.
No one thinks this is going to happen to them when they are traveling. Maybe someone steals your wallet, but you certainly do not lose your life because you decide to give someone your phone number.
I often wonder when he was laying there, like, was he scared? Was he regretful? No, I hope where he's at, it's peaceful. I hope that he's in a beautiful place far than where we are. And I hope he's looking down on us because we miss him something terrible down here.
She was a young immigrant with big dreams.
Cuando fuera grande quería ser policía. Se hizo la solicitud para hacerse cadete.
And she was just always striving to help people and lend a helping hand.
But instead, she would be at the center of a murder investigation.
El policía nos dijo que se había encontrado un cuerpo.
She's been stabbed dozens of times.
She also suffered horrible burns.
Se nos cerró el mundo.
The investigation uncovers a secret love triangle.
There's an undeniable attraction.
She wanted to be more than friends. He was absolutely obsessed. The level of jealousy was consuming him.
This is clearly a pretty disturbed person.
But which of the lovers made the fatal choice?
The relationship seemed to be one built on control.
Almost like a puppet in a puppet master. It's one of those things that kind of makes you go,
November 3rd, 2016. It's a chilly Thursday morning in Oakland, California, a city of 500,000 located just across the bay from San Francisco.
It's considered the blue-collar city compared to San Francisco, but it's probably one of the most diverse cities in California.
This is the home of the Black Panthers. You can always feel that history.
It has a lot of voice, a lot of activism, a lot of outspokenness.
But it also has its share of problems.
It's a good city with a lot of positive things, but if you live here, you're going to witness some violent crimes.
There's a lot of mud out here, isn't it? Yeah. It must have rained a lot last night.
It's a little before noon when a man and his young son are walking through Arroyo Viejo Park.
Arroyo Viejo Park is actually a really beautiful place. It's a very pleasant and peaceful area.
But as they cross a footbridge over the stream that winds through the park, they're met with a horrifying sight.
He saw what appeared to be a body lying in the water.
Do you see that?
It was a young woman, and she was covered in blood.
She was a body down there.
Steering his son away from the traumatic scene, the man pulls out his phone and calls 911.
911, what's your emergency?
Yes, we're hiking down the trail and we noticed a dead body down on the bank.
Oakland police arrive within minutes, and they quickly confirm that the woman is dead.
It was very obvious that this was a homicide.
She was stabbed multiple times all over her body.
She'd also suffered horrible burns.
Send major crimes, please.
When homicide detectives arrive, their top priority is identifying the victim.
There was no ID on the body, and her face was badly burned.
The first thing we wanted to do was check with any missing persons. Are there any missing person reports in the previous 72 hours?
They did a quick search and found a possible match.
We came across a missing person by the name of Carla Ramirez.
"21-year-old Carla Ramirez Segoviano and her family emigrated from Mexico when she was a child.
Nosotros somos de Jalisco, de un ranchito. Mi mamá se vino para acá con mi papá. Ella nos dijo por darnos un futuro mejor. Mi esposo ya tenía muchos años viniendo. Él cuando se vino a este país, él se vino a trabajar en el campo y él aquí hizo raíces, aquí hizo amigos y pues aquí se quedó. Entonces cuando nos venimos todos, pues llegamos aquí a la ciudad de Oakland.
But adjusting to American life wasn't easy for young Carla.
Ella estaba en tercer grado cuando nos venimos. Fue muy difícil ir a la escuela para ella. Yo la metí a clases bilingües para que ella no sufriera tanto y no se presionara tanto. Entonces la tuvieron en las clases. Como hasta la middle school, hasta que agarrara bien el inglés, sí le costó bastante. Pero ya cuando la agarró, sintió como que tenía alas para volar.
She was the interpreter, translator for her parents.
Siempre acudíamos con ella. Ella hacía todo por todos nosotros. Porque ella era la única que hablaba el inglés en la casa. Ella fue muy madura en cuanto a ver por su familia.
And Carla's desire to look out for people became a lifelong goal.
Cuando fuera grande quería ser policía.
It was her dream because she liked helping people.
So, to pursue her dream, Carla joined the Alameda County Sheriff's Department's Explorer program while still in high school.
It was basically like an introduction program for young adults who were interested in law enforcement.
We would go over an array of topics, such as how to deal with elements of crime, like domestic violence or robbery. And we would do some physical training.
She was shy at first, but we connected through, just being curious about what we wanted to do in the future, and because we share the same values and we wanted to make our family proud.
I would say she was in the top 5 of the explorers that I had. She just really conducted herself in a very professional manner.
Carla did so well in the program that after graduating high school, she pursued a criminal justice degree at a local community college.
She just wanted to get her degree and join the academy.
And to help pay for her schooling, she also held down a full-time job at a local restaurant.
I'd actually recommend either this.
She was a cashier, and even there, she wanted to help people. Like when people were struggling to find something in the menu.
It was also through the restaurant that Carla became friends with Laura Rogers.
Laura started working there after Carla had started.
I'm so sorry, I did not mean to do that.
She was just always striving to help people and lend a helping hand.
And from that moment, the two became close.
So, here, let me show you. Alrighty, thank you.
They got along together. They worked really well together from what Carla told me. And they used to, just have a good time and kind of push each other through the shift.
But Carla's restaurant job was only a stepping stone to her ultimate goal.
In the fall of 2016, she applied to the Sheriff's Department's cadet program.
You have to go to school, you have to enroll in a certain amount of units in a college, and then we work you part-time at 10 different duty stations within the sheriff's office.
She was doing all these things to ensure that she would have a bright future.
But now, it appears that Carla's future has come to a sudden, violent end.
After finding a young woman's body in the park, detectives have seemingly identified the victim as Carla.
The missing person report matched the height, the weight, the race.
But that's not all.
2 tattoos were also mentioned on the missing person report.
Carla had a dreamcatcher tattoo on her arm.
And so did the body in the park.
"21-year-old Carla Ramirez Segoviano was a driven young woman pursuing a career in law enforcement.
She was going to college for a degree in criminal justice and had just applied to the sheriff's office's cadet program.
But after Oakland police respond to the report of a body in Arroyo Viejo Park, it appears that Carla's dreams have come to a tragic end.
Carla had just been reported missing earlier that morning, and the tattoos listed on the report matched the victim.
It becomes clear that Carla Ramirez is the same person who was murdered in the Arroyo Viejo Creek.
And her identity makes this case more personal to detectives.
Carla Ramirez was a volunteer explorer for the Sheriff's Department.
When it comes to somebody who's a law enforcement personnel, they don't stop until they get everybody who was involved.
Detectives quickly begin searching the scene for any potential clues.
We immediately locate some matchsticks with green tips, unburned, almost like somebody dropped them and never picked them up. We also noticed those matchsticks led to the stream, which led to the victim.
Carla's body was halfway in the creek.
She's been stabbed dozens of times.
There were also defensive wounds on her hands, which showed that she tried to fight back.
I got a gas nozzle.
After Carla was dead, it appeared that the killer had set her body on fire.
Someone was attempting to not only kill this individual, but to destroy the evidence.
But the attempt had failed.
Part of her body was in the creek. It was wet and muddy.
So while the fire did cause severe damage to Carla's face, it left her tattoos intact.
Why she died, however, is less clear.
I was pretty sure that this was not a robbery. Robbery is a crime of opportunity. You do it, you get in, you get out. This is something that was planned out over time.
And the way Carla died points to a very personal motive.
Stabbings are usually done by people who have a personal relationship with the victim.
The detectives start by questioning the man who called 911.
But there didn't seem to be anything suspicious. They were just walking, looked over to the stream, and saw something that didn't belong.
But he says it was just a normal day in the park until they found Carla's body.
So, hoping to learn more about Carla, the detectives contact her family.
There's a lot of evidence that the family can give us.
Okay.
Where were they going? Who were they going with? Phone numbers, vehicle. All that is information I need to obtain.
And Detective Sanchez speaks fluent Spanish.
So I make contact with the family, something that a detective never wants to do.
Lo siento, señora, pero
No.
encontramos el cuerpo de su hija, Carla.
No. Esto no puede ser cierto. Ya no quiero que diga nada. No quiero escuchar esto. No.
Todo mi mundo se derrumbó. Le digo, yo no quiero saber ya nada. No me diga nada. Yo quería a mi hija viva. Ya no quiero saber nada.
After giving Carla's family a moment to grieve, Detective Sanchez asks if they can walk him through the events leading up to Carla's disappearance.
I needed to get a timeline. Who was the last person that saw her alive?
Carla's mother says that it was the night before.
She says Carla had been hanging out at home with her cousin, Lisette.
Y entró y me dijo, mamá, voy a ir al cine con Lisette. Y le dije, no, Carla. Le dije, ya es muy tarde para que vayas al cine.
Mamá.
Carla, que no.
Está bien. Solo le llevaré a su casa.
Se dio la vuelta molesta y me dijo, ok, pues ahora al rato llego.
But Carla never came back.
Yo desperté a las 2 de la mañana. Lo primero que veo es la puerta del cuarto y vi que no estaba.
So Carla's mom called her daughter's cell phone.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
No me contestó.
Carla, ¿dónde estás?
So she woke up Carla's sister.
Yo le dije, mándale un mensaje a Lisette, a ver dónde están.
But since it was the middle of the night, it took 2 more hours for Lisette to get back to her.
Lisette, ¿dónde están?
Eran como las 4 de la mañana cuando Lisette me regresó la llamada. Y le dije, Lisette, ¿dónde están? Dijo, yo estaba bien dormida.
And she says she hadn't seen Carla in hours.
Dijo, ella solamente me dejó y me dijo que iba con su amiga.
Apparently, Carla had plans to meet up with an old coworker, Laura Rogers.
Detectives investigating the murder of Carla Ramirez Segoviano are trying to trace the 21-year-old's movements in the hours leading up to her death.
According to Carla's cousin, she was planning to meet up with her friend Laura that night.
¿Has visto a Carla?
Carla's family had tried to reach Laura before reporting Carla missing.
Her parents picked up the phone.
Pero la hija no estaba. Se había salido.
Could there be a second victim somewhere?
After wrapping up with Carla's family, the detectives issue a bolo for Carla's car.
It's not at the house. It's not at the park. The suspect, more than likely, took Carla Ramirez's vehicle after they killed her.
A quick search of the DMV records provides detectives with the make, model, and license plate number.
And we're immediately able to put that license plate into what we call license plate recognition, LPR systems.
LPRs are automated systems that scan license plates for traffic monitoring and enforcement.
So now all law enforcement will be on the lookout for that plate.
With everyone on the lookout for Carla's vehicle, the detectives head to the house where Laura lives with her parents.
Please come in.
I think they were expecting us because they were getting calls from the family of Carla. So they invited us into the house.
Is there any news?
Yes, and I'm afraid it's not good.
Have you heard from Laura? I told her that Carla Ramirez is a victim of a killing.
She got home a little while ago. Laura, can you come in here, please?
Laura came out of her room. We spoke. I told Laura, do you know Carla Ramirez? She said yes. I go, she was found murdered in a park nearby.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Do you mind if we have a moment alone with your daughter?
Detectives asked if they could speak with her alone because oftentimes there are things people would say to a stranger that they wouldn't say to their parents.
She's not in trouble. We just have some questions.
It's okay, honey. I'll be right in there if you need me. Okay? All right.
I told her how important this is, and she agreed to speak to us.
And detectives have a feeling Laura is going to be the key to finding out what happened to Carla.
Laura is somebody that Carla would go see after 11 o'clock in the evening against her family's knowledge. I definitely believe that Laura has information that can help us.
The question is, will Laura be willing to tell detectives what she knows?
One of the first things I asked her is, when was the last time you had contact with Carla Ramirez?
I don't know. Maybe about 6-7 months ago.
This was totally against the information I was getting, that Carla had visited Laura Rogers the night she went missing.
Where were you last night?
And when the detectives asked Laura where she had been that night, things got even stranger.
She had indicated that she had been with a coworker named Jay, and they had been driving around all night.
So tell us a little bit more about Jay. Could Laura and Jay have gone to meet up with Carla that night?
Maybe they went to the park to meet and socialize, and something went awry. Something just went sideways.
Or is it possible Laura is lying?
I'm not really sure. I'm sorry.
She couldn't really give us specifics of Jay, couldn't really give us specifics of the vehicle that Jay was driving.
She's being very vague and standoffish. You would think if your close friend was just murdered, you would want to help find out who did it.
But to detectives, it seems Laura has something to hide.
She must know who the killer was and was trying to protect them.
Ma. Hoping a change of scenery will help Laura open up, they ask her to come down to the station.
It was imperative that we speak to Laura in a different environment, and she agreed to come to the police station.
And as soon as they get her into the interrogation room, Laura breaks down.
It probably became too real at that point.
She starts to cry. She starts to be visibly distraught.
Can I talk to my mom?
Sure.
Detectives believe Laura's request could work to their advantage.
They go get her mother.
I told her, I believe Laura is a vital witness, and we need this information to find the killer of Carla Ramirez. And she may feel more comfortable speaking with you.
They said you wanted to talk to me.
Her mother is very worried, very concerned, and says, "What do you know about this? Do you know the killer?"
Don't tell me you were involved in this. What if I was?
When detectives investigating the murder of Carla Ramirez Segoviano leave her friend Laura Rogers alone in an interrogation room with her mother, their case takes a surprising turn.
Detectives are listening in and watching through a two-way mirror.
Don't tell me you were involved in this. What if I was?
At that moment in time, I knew that we had a possible accomplice, accessory, if not a principal, in the murder of Carla Ramirez.
The realization means the investigation needs to go in an entirely different direction.
I knocked on the door. I interrupted the mother and Laura speaking.
Mrs. Rogers, will you please step out?
Is my daughter in trouble?
I'm afraid so.
I told the mother, Laura is hiding personal knowledge, if not personal culpability, in the murder.
Then the detectives officially place Laura under arrest.
After reading Laura Rogers her Miranda rights, she did agree to continue speaking to the investigators.
I said, look, what happened to Carla Ramirez?
But put on the spot by detectives, Laura can hardly continue.
She's very emotional and finds it difficult to speak.
I put a piece of paper in front of her and I started asking her questions.
When was the last time you saw Carla?
It may be easier for a person to write their responses because when you speak it, that may be psychologically overwhelming.
What was your relationship with Carla?
So y'all two were close?
Yeah.
Okay, so what does that mean more than friends?
As Laura and Carla were spending more and more time together, there was an undeniable attraction growing between them that eventually led to them kissing.
Thanks for giving me a ride. I don't mind. At all. All right.
But Laura says she wasn't entirely comfortable with where their relationship was heading.
She was feeling confused and guilty.
Because Laura also has a boyfriend, 23-year-old Curtis Taylor.
She considered it cheating on him.
And eventually, she had broken things off with Carla.
I don't know if I could keep doing this. What do you mean?
Laura decided to choose Curtis over her feelings that she had for Carla.
But she says that the guilt continued.
Eventually, Laura Rogers told Curtis Taylor that she had kissed Carla.
What?
It didn't mean anything to me, I swear.
Don't lie to me.
When Curtis found out that Laura had kind of had this fling with Carla, his first reaction is to physically hit her.
That occurred at her parents' house, and she suffered a bloody lip.
What is going on in here? Did you hit my daughter?
Her mom heard the commotion, and when she realized what happened, she threw Curtis out.
She also told Laura to break things off with him.
You've got to cut them off.
But Laura defied her parents.
She was seeing him without their knowledge.
But according to Laura, there was no going back to the way things were between them.
Curtis Taylor was obsessed with the fact that Laura and Carla had some type of relationship. So she said, I had to eliminate the past for me and Curtis to continue our relationship.
What does that mean? Eliminating the past.
Laura said that she wanted to eliminate the past by eliminating Carla.
So according to Laura, she lured Carla to the park.
They walked down to the stream like any couple would.
Taking Carla down to this creek bed area, there was this expectation of maybe some romance as well as a surprise gift.
Got me something? I do. Turn around.
When Carla turned and closed her eyes, Laura said that she pulled out a knife and she began plunging the knife into the back of Carla's neck. Laura continued to stab Carla over and over and over again until she was unresponsive.
Then she said she poured gasoline over Carla's body, set her on fire, and ran.
Laura has just confessed to killing Carla Ramirez, stabbing her and burning her.
However, the detectives still suspect there's more to Laura's story.
How did you get the gasoline? How did you get the matches? I knew she didn't do this alone.
And it's not hard for detectives to guess who else might be involved.
Did Curtis have anything at all to do with this?
She literally gets a marker and writes, "He didn't do it."
Questioned by detectives, Laura Rogers has confessed to killing her friend, Carla Ramirez Segoviano.
Laura says she did it because her boyfriend, Curtis Taylor, was jealous of the brief romance between the two women.
But she claims Curtis had nothing to do with the murder.
What she's telling them, obviously nobody would know unless they're there when it happened. But you also have to wonder, is she telling the truth?
And detectives have their doubts.
Curtis, by Laura's own admission, was the jealous one, and he'd been violent toward her in the past.
So after talking to Laura, detectives bring Curtis in for questioning.
Please take a seat, Mr. Taylor.
We brought Curtis to the interview room. I asked him if he knew Carla Ramirez. He said no.
No.
The detectives know that's a lie.
Laura had already told them that Curtis knew about her romance with Carla.
Yeah, you do. Laura's friend.
Oh, her?
Curtis now says that he does know who Carla is, but that he never knew her name.
You hear about what happened to her?
Well, yeah.
He said that he was aware of Laura Rogers planning to kill Carla Ramirez.
And you didn't try to stop her?
I thought she was all talk.
He says he was surprised when Laura called him on Wednesday night.
Laura called him earlier that evening and says, "We're going to go to the park at Arroyo Vale. Can you go get the gasoline and the matches?"
So what'd you do?
I got her some gas and matches.
He purchased those at a local auto shop and staged it at a certain location at Arroyo Vale Park where Laura was going to bring Carla.
Then, according to Curtis, he hid in the bushes nearby and waited.
He said he just wanted to stay nearby to see if she would actually do it.
Even then, Curtis says as he watched, he couldn't believe what he was seeing.
Laura's clothing was covered with blood.
Damn, girl, I didn't think you were serious.
Take these.
She says, "These are the keys to Carla's vehicle. We have to get rid of it."
Curtis says he then drove them to a nearby motel in Carla's car.
Laura was able to clean herself, change clothes, and then discard the bloody clothing.
Then, they ditched Carla's car in a parking lot of a nearby train station.
Curtis says that he cleaned off the knife and then he handed it to a homeless person, gave it away.
Curtis's statement gives detectives enough to hold him as an accessory to murder.
Curtis was arrested and booked.
News of the arrests and the alleged motive behind the crime take Carla's family by surprise.
Cuando Leo nos dijo que ellas tenían algo que ver, Laura y Carla, yo no lo podía creer.
But some of Carla's closest friends know it was true.
Carla did confide in me that she liked Laura and that she wanted to be more than friends with her.
Que haya sido que tiene, no había derecho para que le quitara la vida.
In the days that follow, the detectives are able to confirm many aspects of Curtis's story.
When the dumpster was searched next to the motel, they found Laura's bloody clothing, just as Curtis had described. And Carla's vehicle was exactly where Curtis said it was at the train station.
Hey, they found Carla's car too. It was there.
Police also gathered surveillance footage from numerous stores in the area around the park.
We have Curtis on video purchasing the gasoline can.
But when the detectives pull Laura and Curtis's cell phone records, his role in the murder appears larger than he initially let on.
In text messages, it's very clear that for months, Curtis Taylor was fixated on this kiss between Carla and Laura.
In fact, he was absolutely obsessed.
The detectives also discover that Laura had 2 phones.
Since her parents disapproved of Curtis, she had a second secret phone that she used to communicate with him.
And that is the phone that was being used to communicate with Carla.
It was also the same phone that sent the text that lured Carla to the park.
But it wasn't Laura who sent those texts to Carla.
Based on the location data of the 3 phones, Curtis's phone and Laura's second secret phone were in the same location. But Laura's other phone wasn't.
Carla thought that she'd been communicating with Laura, but it was actually Curtis using Laura's other cell phone. Meanwhile, Curtis and Laura had been exchanging texts, making the coordinating plans to murder Carla.
He was the one pulling the strings, the manipulator and the controller.
But it is also clear that Laura was a very willing participant in that plan and wanted that plan to move forward.
Which, as far as the police and prosecutors are concerned, make Curtis and Laura equally guilty of murder.
The DA charges both Laura and Curtis with premeditated murder.
But just as their trial is set to begin, the case takes an unexpected turn.
Laura pleaded guilty with no promises and no plea deal in place.
Laura's taking full responsibility for this murder.
Shortly before Laura Rogers and her boyfriend, Curtis Taylor, are set to go on trial for the murder of Carla Ramirez Segoviano, Laura makes a surprising move.
She pled guilty to all charges, including first-degree murder.
It's very rare for somebody to plead guilty to a first-degree murder and to every single charge on the charging document.
I've seen people who are dead to rights guilty. They'll still take their case to trial because the worst case scenario is they get convicted.
To some, the guilty plea is a victory.
I was very happy that Carla's family would get that closure and that justice from Laura Rogers' plea.
But to others, it only causes problems.
After Laura pleads guilty, it limits certain pieces of evidence that can and cannot be used.
In this case, Laura Rogers' statement was now going to be inadmissible against Curtis Taylor.
The prosecutors suspect that may have been the motive behind Laura's guilty plea.
A part of me wondered if Laura believed that if she pled guilty to the first-degree murder, if that would stop my prosecution of Curtis as well.
It's like, well, is she setting herself up to just take the blame for all of this and try and make him as innocent as possible during trial?
But when Curtis goes to trial on April 12, 2021, the prosecutors maintain that he was just as much to blame for Carla's death as Laura.
To prove it, the prosecutors relied on the text messages between Curtis and Laura.
It became clear between the two of them that they were plotting to kill Carla to eliminate the past transgression between Laura and Carla. And once that past had been eliminated, Laura could be forgiven.
The prosecutors also placed an emphasis on how cell phone tower data proved that it was Curtis who used Laura's secret cell phone to lure Carla to the crime scene.
Those text messages were from the secret phone, but they were from Curtis because we're able to see that Laura and that phone were not in the same spot.
Prosecutors also detail the horrific nature of the crime.
Evidence actually showed through the coroner's office that Carla was likely still alive when she was being burned. due to the soot that was located in her esophagus.
However, what the prosecution can't prove is whether Curtis held the knife, poured the gasoline, or lit the match. But in the end, it doesn't matter.
Under California law, you could be the actual perpetrator in a crime, or you could be an aider and abetter, which means that you knew the intention of the crime and you took actions that helped a crime take place.
He was the person who set everything into motion. Without Curtis, you don't have the murder of Carla.
But when it's the defense's turn, they insist that Curtis never believed Laura would kill Carla.
That makes him not guilty of premeditated murder, and then they placed all the blame squarely on Laura.
Which was convenient because she wasn't there.
But ultimately, Curtis's defense fails to sway the jury.
Curtis was found guilty.
And a few weeks later, Curtis and Laura are both sentenced to 25 years in prison.
She was not sentenced until the same time Curtis Taylor was.
Fue algo ya tranquilizante porque a pesar de que pasaron tantos años, por fin se les dio la sentencia.
And you could tell with Laura, there was a lot of shame, sadness, crying. There was some remorse there.
Not that Laura's remorse made much difference to Carla's family.
Le dije a Laura, ¿cómo es posible que tú no paraste cuando mi hija te suplicaba que no lo hicieran? Porque si Laura tanto haya apreciado la amistad de mi hija, o como ellos dicen que tuvo una relación, ¿por qué no pararon? ¿Por qué le hicieron tanto daño?
And to this day, Carla's friends and family still struggle to make sense of the horrific crime.
I didn't understand why they would drag Carla into it if they were dealing with their problems.
She was taken down by a darkness that existed inside of Laura and Curtis. It's very sad and tragic.
And Carla was the kind of young woman who would have continued. He answered his country's call.
He deployed to the Middle East to do a full tour.
She was the woman he left behind.
You can only imagine the longing.
And despite the challenges, they made it work.
They were together for 13 years. They had 4 beautiful daughters. They had a bright future ahead of them.
Until, after surviving Afghanistan, he died at his own front door.
She hears a knock at the door.
The next thing she hears are gunshots.
It looked like it was personal. It was an execution.
Was it also a betrayal?
They find hundreds of text messages. They found nude pictures. This was more than just a fling.
But does it add up to murder?
It ain't against the law to cheat.
Or is the obvious suspect not always the right one?
They are gloating about their crime.
They consider themselves Bonnie and Clyde.
Talk about a plot twist.
This man lost his life because of that?
April 7th, 2021. It's late Wednesday night in Newport News, Virginia, a hard-working port city just across the James River from Norfolk, home to the U.S. Navy's Atlantic Fleet.
Newport News is pretty much a military town because you got one of the biggest naval bases on the East Coast right here. And you also got a couple surrounding Army bases as well.
You have a lot of active and retired military in and around Newport News.
And at 2 o'clock that April morning, the wife of one former serviceman makes a frantic call to 911.
911, what is your emergency?
Something's happened to my husband.
Okay, calm down. What is your name?
The caller is 36-year-old Danielle Shabazz.
Danielle told the operator that she and her children were away from the house that night.
But she'd called her husband, 39-year-old Sal Shabazz, to say goodnight.
Hey, baby, how's it going?
Hey. Danielle and her husband were on the phone talking, and all of a sudden, she hears a knock at the door.
Hold on, somebody's at the door.
Who?
He went to see who it was.
What's up? Can I help you?
She hears her husband talking to whoever is at the door.
What are you talking about, man?
The next thing she hears are a series of bangs.
I'm only worried about it.
Sal. I don't know. I think it was gunshots.
Then the phone goes silent.
He won't answer me.
Your mind would just run the gamut of possibilities. Your mind just starts spinning.
She was completely terrified that something had happened to him.
Please send somebody to the house.
Sal Shabazz grew up in South Bend, Indiana, as one of 12 siblings.
His mother had 6 children, and then she adopted 6 more.
I couldn't do it without God. He called me to be the mother of these children, and he equipped me to do so, to parent them.
The fact that half his siblings were adopted wasn't all that set Sal's family apart.
He grew up with his mom being Christian, his father being of the Islam faith.
His full name is Saladin Ibn Shabazz. Saladin is an Arab name.
He was named from a historical sultan from Egypt and Syria who fought the Crusaders in the Holy Land.
From an early age, Sal lived up to his heroic name.
He was a star athlete when he was in high school.
He played varsity football from the day he walked into high school all the way through. He's broke all kind of records that have yet today to be broken.
He was very popular.
Sal Shabazz is that all-American kind of dude.
After finishing high school, Sal continued his success in college.
Sal played football for Grand Valley State and then transferred to Minnesota.
Although it wasn't without risks.
Sal was immediately deployed to the Middle East to do a full tour in Afghanistan.
And the disruptions didn't end once Sal came home from overseas.
Once Sal returned from his deployment, he was stationed in Newport News, Virginia. So Danielle packed up with her husband and they moved 800 miles away from Indiana to the Chesapeake Bay.
Together, they built a new life in Virginia.
Sal and Danielle had 4 daughters.
Danielle was working at the post office as a mail carrier, and once Sal got discharged from the military, he got a job as a forklift operator.
A decade after Sal first shipped off to Afghanistan, he and Danielle had beaten the odds.
A lot of military couples don't last after the spouse is away for such a long time. Sal and Danielle were the exception. It was almost like they were meant for each other.
He's a good husband, awesome dad. He always was a provider.
They had a bright future ahead of them.
Only now, Danielle fears something terrible has happened to her husband.
Sal's wife has called Newport News police after hearing what she believes to be gunshots.
They had been talking on the phone when she heard the bangs.
He won't answer me.
And at that point, 911 dispatches the police to the house to investigate.
When officers arrive, they see nothing alarming. At first,
the front door is closed. There's no sign of a gunman.
There are no signs of forced entry.
Sheriff's office.
Not taking any chances, the police carefully make entry into the Shabazz home.
Inside, they find a horrific scene.
The first thing they see is Sal Shabazz lying on the floor.
He's laying in a pool of blood.
He had been shot 4 times.
Hard-working forklift driver and Army veteran Sal Shabazz was as all-American as they come.
Sal was a very nice guy, a cool person, easy to get along with.
He had integrity, he was kind, he was honest.
And he was raising 4 children with the love of his life, his wife, Danielle.
She was someone that he felt that he could build something with, build a life with, build a family with.
But now, police are at Sal and Danielle's home in response to a desperate 911 call.
Danielle, she's on the phone with her husband, and he hears a knock at the door, and the next thing she hears are these bangs.
Sal! Sal! She knows in her gut something's wrong.
When police enter the home, they discover that Danielle was right to fear the worst.
Sal's lying on the floor in a pool of blood. He was bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds.
He was pronounced dead at the scene.
When homicide detectives arrive, they start their investigation by examining Sal's body.
He's been shot 2 times in the torso, twice in the head, execution style.
Near the body, homicide detectives find 4 shell casings lying on the floor.
They then took those casings and sent them off to ballistics to be tested.
Ballistics could eventually lead detectives to the murder weapon, but there's little at the scene to suggest the killer's motive.
A thorough search of the home shows that there was nothing disturbed, which ruled out the potential for robbery.
This was deliberate. This was intentional.
The question was, why target Sal?
Looking for answers, the detectives canvass the neighborhood.
Officers talked to neighbors and asked them if they had any information.
None of the neighbors reported seeing anything suspicious.
Everybody was asleep at the time of the crime.
But the canvas could still provide some crucial information.
How you doing?
Hey, the neighbor across the street had a doorbell camera.
Doorbells have been used in cases across the country to assist in getting information to police.
With the homeowner, detectives review the doorbell cam surveillance footage.
This video shows a black SUV which pulls up at 2 in the morning.
A shadowy black figure gets out of the SUV and then walks up to Sal's house.
Sal opened the door. They had an exchange of words.
Then the figure at the door pulled out a gun and started shooting.
The shooting played out exactly as Danielle described.
The video also appears to confirm that Sal's murder was a targeted hit.
The suspect jumps back in the SUV and he peels off with the headlights turned off.
This was strictly about killing this person.
But confirmation of how it happened doesn't get detectives any closer to solving the case.
They can't make out the person or the license plate number.
With no other leads, investigators turn to the closest thing to a witness they have.
Investigators' next move is to speak to the person who was on the phone when it happened, Danielle.
The officers sent a cruiser to pick Danielle up and bring her in to see if she could offer any additional information as to what happened to her husband.
We're sorry for your loss.
When Danielle sits down with detectives, it appears that she is still in shock.
This is a tough situation. Danielle just lost her husband, but police have to do their job.
Detectives ask Danielle to start by walking them through the events leading up to her call to 911.
We were just saying goodnight, and everything was just fine until someone knocked on the door.
Hold on, someone's at the door.
She said he goes to the door, he answers it. She hears a conversation.
Sal.
And she hears what sounds like gunshots, and then the phone goes silent.
She just doesn't know what to do at that point.
However, Danielle does know one thing.
Do you have any idea who was at the door?
She does not hesitate to give them an answer.
There's no question in her mind who did this. No question.
It's this woman that works with me, Tashara Jackson.
Sal Shabazz's wife, Danielle, has just told detectives who she thinks gunned down the 39-year-old Army veteran in the foyer of their Newport News, Virginia home.
Sal!
Danielle tells investigators that she is convinced that Tashara Jackson, who was a fellow co-worker at the post office, is responsible for her husband's death.
What makes you think she was involved?
Tashara and I have been having problems.
She and Tashara have been going back and forth in a feud that began over a dispute at work.
What sort of problems?
I don't even know. It's just like we don't get along.
And according to Danielle, things had recently escalated.
She wanted to Tashara at the nail salon.
Well.
And I guess they have words.
I don't know what you looking at, so you need to put those eyeballs back in your head.
Her and Tashara got into a huge argument outside of the nail salon.
She did admit that while Tashara was getting her nails done, that she in fact slashed her tires.
You slashed Tashara tires?
I know I shouldn't have, but I just got so mad.
And things only got worse from there.
A few days later, according to Danielle, Tashara retaliated.
It was my birthday, and Sal took me to Vegas for the weekend.
When she got back, her car was vandalized.
Someone had spray painted the vehicle, slashed every single tire, and stuck a candy bar in her gas tank.
She knew exactly who it was. She knew that Tashara was behind it.
She didn't call the police, but she just didn't let it go either.
Danielle said the night of the murder, they went to go confront Tashara.
Sal went with you?
Yeah.
He only goes to protect her.
According to Danielle, the confrontation occurred outside a local restaurant.
Oh, there you are. Yeah, right on time. Come and get it. Come and get it. Because you can't mind your business. What you gonna do about it?
They get to scrapping, Tashara and Danielle. They're going at it.
Danielle says she was gaining the upper hand when Tashara threatened to take things to the next level.
While she beating Tashara down, Tashara hollers out, grab my pistol out of her car.
That's when Sal and Danielle decided it was time to go.
You guys left?
Yeah, we jumped in the car and we got out of there.
However, Danielle says she was afraid of what would happen next.
She felt like Tashara was going to retaliate.
So she grabs the girls, goes to a hotel.
She just felt that it was safer.
Sal didn't go to the hotel with you?
I tried to get him to come with us, but he wouldn't listen.
He wants to protect his house, protect his home. He doesn't know what's going to happen next.
What's your favorite subject?
But he just wants to make sure that they have a home to come back to.
Doing everything she could.
Guys want to play a game? I'm gonna protect this house.
Dedicated to her children. Being a man,
she shows
he's
him
gonna
that
stand his ground. If anybody comes up in here, they're gonna have to deal with me.
What's your favorite subject?
A few hours later, Sal was dead.
Which is why Danielle is so sure that Tashara killed him.
But while Danielle is certain, the detectives aren't so sure.
Why would this work feud escalate to where somebody is now dead?
It raises questions as Danielle trying to throw the detectives off to look in a different direction.
To rule her out definitively, detectives ask Danielle to submit to a GSR test.
It isn't uncommon in a murder to look at the spouse first.
They did do gunshot residue analysis just to make sure that she wasn't the shooter.
Based on the neighbor's door cam, though, the shooter wasn't a woman. They are looking for a black male.
If she were not the trigger person, gunshot residue can be transferred very easily.
While they wait for the results, detectives move on to the only other lead they have, Tashara Jackson. But when she sits down for questioning the following morning, they're surprised by what they find.
She's the opposite of what Danielle portrays her as.
Tashara, based on Danielle's account, is evil, vindictive, but Tashara was in fact a loving, nurturing, church-going person with no criminal record, no violent history.
And according to Tashara, that's not the only thing contrary to what Danielle led them to believe.
Once detectives sit down with Tashara, they begin to hear a very different side of the feud between Tashara and Danielle.
Let me just tell you, she's crazy.
Tashara tells detectives that it is in fact Danielle who has been the instigator in this feud.
What supposedly triggered the feud is what really raised red flags for the detectives.
Tashara tells investigators the feud began when she found out that Danielle was having an affair with another one of their co-workers.
Danielle Shabazz told detectives investigating her husband's murder that she was certain her co-worker Tashara Jackson was responsible.
Danielle and Tashara work at the post office together, but over the past month or so, they've been having this feud.
But according to Tashara, Danielle hadn't told detectives the whole story.
Tashara reveals to detectives that Danielle was having an affair.
His name is Rob Barnes. He works with us at the post office.
That co-worker happens to be the husband of Tashara's best friend.
According to Tashara, the feud started because she was not happy that Danielle was sleeping with her best friend's husband.
Tashara felt like Danielle was the one who escalated the entire feud when she took it upon herself to slash her tires at the nail shop.
Is that when you trashed her car?
I never touched her car.
She makes it clear that she would have never attempted to hurt her and she would not have killed her husband.
Then who did?
You need to ask Danielle. She's the one who's been cheating.
Tashara is pointing the finger at Danielle, and Danielle is pointing the finger at Tashara.
However, if Danielle is having an affair, that could give her motive to get rid of her husband.
They knew that she didn't pull the trigger, but could she have possibly had her lover do it?
To determine if Tashara is telling the truth, detectives pulled Danielle's phone records.
The detectives were able to confirm that she was, in fact, having an affair with Rob Barnes.
They find hundreds of very sexually explicit text messages between Danielle and Rob.
But as steamy as the affair was, it didn't appear to be a mere fling.
Danielle and Rob were exchanging I love you text messages.
They potentially want to be together now.
Could that have led to Sal's murder?
Or did Danielle have another reason to get rid of her husband?
When detectives dug into Danielle's past, they found out that her perfect marriage may have not been so perfect after all.
Records show that Danielle had taken out a protective order against Sal. Danielle told investigators that Sal had headbutted her after finding messages between Danielle and another man in her phone.
But when investigators talked to people who knew the couple, it sounds more like Danielle might not be so innocent.
He and Danielle had a very, very toxic relationship.
In fact, the problem started well before they were ever married.
For their senior prom, he took another young lady and Danielle sliced the tires on the car.
It was the same thing that Danielle did to Tashara years later.
According to Sal's mother, similar incidents occurred throughout the couple's relationship.
Once she was mad at Sal, she took all his clothes and put them in a pile and poured bleach on them.
By 2021, the marriage appeared all but over.
They were talking about separating, but he did not want to leave his kids. I used to tell Sal to make the necessary sacrifices to try to keep his family together for the sake of his girls.
But for all of Sal's reasons to stick things out, detectives soon learned that Danielle had potentially one big reason to want him gone.
Sal had a $156,000 life insurance policy.
The beneficiary is Danielle.
If Danielle is having this affair, the motive would be if I can get rid of my husband collect on this policy. Me and Rob Barnes got a couple extra dollars.
But an affair and a six-figure insurance policy still aren't enough to prove that Danielle was involved in her husband's death.
Nothing that the officers have is a nail in the coffin, but it damn sure didn't look good.
It did give detectives a little leverage, though.
Armed with what they've learned, detectives bring Danielle in for another round of questioning.
They immediately asked Danielle if she had any issues in her marriage to Sal.
What do you mean?
She told them they were fine, they were in a happy marriage.
She also disputes that she was messing around with Rob Barnes.
We're friends. We work together. That's all.
What she didn't know is investigators already saw the text messages.
Danielle finally concedes, yes, she was having an affair.
But it's not what you think.
She insists she had nothing to do with Sal's death.
Danielle tells detectives that she and Sal may not have had the perfect relationship, but she would have never wanted to hurt him.
She also informed the officers that she didn't even know about the life insurance policy until after he was dead.
Not that her denials do anything to relieve the detectives' suspicions.
She withheld vital information.
Still doesn't give investigators enough to charge her with anything.
However, there's also one piece of vital information that detectives have withheld from Danielle.
The gunshot residue test that was performed on Danielle during her first interview came back.
Danielle tested positive for gunshot residue.
Danielle, you tested positive for GSR.
How you gonna explain that?
When detectives investigating her husband's murder confronted Danielle Shabazz about the affair she was having with a coworker, the mother of four admitted that she'd been unfaithful.
While she finally owned up to the affair, she kept insisting she had nothing to do with her husband's murder.
Investigators find what Danielle is saying hard to believe.
Because detectives have recently received results from the gunshot residue test they conducted on Danielle just hours after the shooting.
And these results revealed that Danielle did in fact have residue on her hands.
When detectives confront Danielle with this information, she is genuinely stunned.
How you gonna explain that?
I did not shoot a gun that night. I swear.
Danielle is like, I have no idea where that came from.
And based on the evidence, it wasn't Danielle who shot Sal 4 times just inside the couple's front door.
They know that a man killed Sal.
If you go back to that video footage from the doorbell video, it definitely was a man who pulled the trigger.
But does that mean Danielle wasn't involved?
Detectives theorize that Danielle may have recruited her lover Rob to do the murder.
And when Danielle and her lover connected at a later point, that gunshot residue could have been transferred by the holding of hands or touching something that the trigger man touched.
Could that explain how gunshot residue ended up on Danielle's hands?
That's not the only possible explanation.
She could have gotten the residue on her hands in an innocent way.
It could have happened when she rode to the police station in the police cruiser.
Which means the gunshot residue alone is not enough to make an arrest.
All of that is just a theory rooted in speculation, and investigators will have to have more evidence before they are able to move forward with any murder charges.
And while Danielle and Rob's cell phone records provide plenty of evidence of an affair, that's all detectives are able to find.
They look through their text exchanges, and they don't have any evidence of any back and forth about plotting to kill Sal.
Police also found that there was no evidence in their phone records that had them reaching out to a third party to hire the hit.
In fact, the cell phone records appear to exonerate both Danielle and her lover.
When detectives pulled their GPS locations at the time of the murder, they hit a stumbling block.
Rob nor Danielle were even in the area based on the data from the phone records.
She was nowhere close, nor was Rob.
Does that mean Danielle and her lover are innocent? Or does it mean they're smart?
Maybe Rob left his phone at home on purpose, and Danielle made that phone call to Sal from the hotel so the cops couldn't place her at the scene.
Either way, the detectives are no closer to solving Sal's murder.
They just don't have enough evidence.
They didn't have a choice other than to continue with the investigation.
So detectives decide to take a second look at Tashara Jackson, the co-worker Danielle named as Sal's killer.
Just to rule her out, the detectives pulled Tashara's cell phone records.
Although instead of ruling Tashara out, the detectives make a surprising discovery.
GPS evidence puts Tashara in close proximity to the scene of the killing, at the time of the killing.
The records don't put her at the scene of the crime, but the reason why also arouses suspicion.
Tashara's phone was turned off only moments before the murder.
Wasn't turned back on until several hours after.
This is a stunning revelation for police. Maybe Danielle was right from the beginning, and Tashara did have something to do with Sal's murder.
However, there is still one piece of the puzzle missing.
They know that Sal was shot by a man.
She must have been waiting in the car when it happened, but who could it have been that got out of the car and actually pulled the trigger?
Digging through Tashara's phone records, the detectives soon come up with a possible answer.
In the weeks leading up to the murder, Tashara had been communicating regularly with another man who also worked at the post office.
His name is Jeremy Petway.
And they weren't talking about mail. They were having an affair.
Which is wild, considering Danielle's workplace affair is what started the feud with Tashara.
All these people sleeping around. What the heck they had going on in that post office?
Based on the text messages, Tashara's affair with Jeremy was just as hot and heavy as Danielle's tryst with Rob.
Nude photos had been sent, and the conversation even included how good their sex was. They also discussed leaving their partners and being together.
And much more important for detectives, that's not all the lovers discussed.
There are text messages where Tashara is telling Mr. Petway that she appreciates him looking out for her.
Jeremy takes back that he was the protector.
They have this exchange about being Bonnie and Clyde.
Detectives investigating the murder of 39-year-old Sal Shabazz were all but convinced that his wife Danielle was behind his death. But new information has just turned the case on its head.
Cell phone records put Danielle's co-worker, Tashara Jackson, and Tashara's lover, Jeremy Petway, near the scene where the murder occurred.
Danielle had been pointing the finger at Tashara from the beginning.
She and this co-worker had some sort of a feud or rivalry.
Based on Tashara and Jeremy's text, Danielle was right about Tashara all along.
Although Tashara and Jeremy do not openly admit to killing Sal Shabazz, the implications are clear. In the days following the shooting, Tashara told Jeremy, "You didn't hesitate."
And he calls them Bonnie and Clyde.
To detectives, it is clear that they are gloating about their crime.
And one of Jeremy's last text messages leaves little doubt they're responsible for Sal's death.
Jeremy tells Tashara, "I gave the gun to one of our friends at work."
Detectives assumed they're texting about the murder weapon.
Investigators quickly follow up on what they've learned from the phone records.
Investigators got a warrant to search the home of the friend that Jeremy mentioned in the text message.
Police show up to this person's house.
Who else is in the house with you?
And as luck would have it, Jeremy is also there.
Jeremy, step outside. You're under arrest. Hands behind your back.
The police place Jeremy under arrest and search the house.
Upstairs under the friend's bed, detectives find a handgun.
The officers send the gun straight to ballistics to be tested. And when the results came back, it was indeed the weapon that was used to kill Sal.
It's just slam dunk in the mind of the investigators.
Detectives also take Tashara into custody.
She asks for an attorney and refuses to make a statement.
And at the police station, Jeremy insists that the only relationship they have is as co-workers.
But Jeremy's denials and Tashara's silence do little to deter the detectives.
Even without their confessions, police are ready to charge them with first-degree murder.
Newport News police did their job, and they did it well.
Despite everyone suspecting Danielle, the arrest couldn't have happened without her.
She was a big help because she was on the phone when it all happened.
She was also the person to first put the police on to Tashara.
But when Tashara Jackson goes on trial in March of 2022, it's also clear that her feud with Danielle led directly to Sal's death.
All of this started with Tashara not being happy about Danielle having an affair with her best friend's husband.
The disagreement escalated when Tashara and Danielle got into the argument in front of the nail salon. Danielle slashed Tashara's tires.
To retaliate, Tashara vandalized Danielle's car.
And things only escalated from there.
That led to the beatdown that Danielle gave Tashara in the restaurant parking lot.
For Tashara, it was the last straw.
She wanted to end this feud once and for all.
Prosecutors lay out how, after that altercation at the restaurant, Tashara calls her friend, Jeremy.
Now, we need to get this girl. We're gonna get her.
That begins the murder plot that ultimately ends in the death of Sal.
Just bring the car, bring the gun.
And early on the morning of April 7th, just hours after the parking lot showdown, Tashara and Jeremy set their plan in motion.
Using their phone records, prosecutors was able to show that Jeremy went to pick Tashara up.
Then, as they neared Danielle and Sal's house, Jeremy and Tashara turned off their phones.
She turns her cell phone off.
Lief aus der 24 Stunden.
Investigators can go back and see that you turned it off just before this man got killed.
But the neighbor's doorbell cam captured what happened next.
Jeremy got out of the car and went up to Danielle and Sal's front door.
They intended to shoot her, but they didn't know she wasn't at home.
They had no idea that Danielle had taken the children to the hotel.
So?
Instead, it was Sal who answered the door.
Yeah, I heard you got a problem with Tashara.
Man, we know what happened.
What are you talking about?
Man, don't even worry about it.
Sal!
Had Danielle answered the door, she would have been the one who was killed.
Then Jeremy ditched the gun with a friend, and when detectives brought her in for questioning, Tashara used the affair to turn suspicion towards Danielle.
Then who did?
You need to ask Danielle. She's the one who's been cheating.
They thought they had it all figured out.
But the defense can't explain away Tashara's phone records.
With the text messages, there's no doubt left that this is what happened.
Even though they did not have confessions, they did not have eyewitnesses, they had enough evidence that when you put it all together, it painted one very ugly picture.
Would it be enough to convince the jury?
The jury finds Tashara guilty after less than an hour of deliberation.
And Jeremy meets the same fate.
Jeremy is convicted following his own trial.
They were both sentenced to 39 years in prison.
Tashara's lawyer tried to argue the fact that, well, since he pulled the trigger, maybe we can get her less time. The judge said, nope, she gonna get the same time as he got.
Even though the family of the deceased wanted life without parole, they were satisfied with the verdict.
I think about the number of families that don't get justice. I'll take 39 years, it's better than nothing.
But no amount of time can make up for the injustice done to Saladin Shabazz.
This was a man who served his country. This was a man who was married to the love of his life. And even though they had issues and problems, the thing that should have ended their marriage was divorce, not death.
The pain of losing my child will never go away. You mourn for that for the rest of your life.
Trận đấu chuẩn bị được bắt đầu với quyền ra bóng thuộc về Manchester United.
Rodrigo. Đó là pha phản công. Bàn thắng đã tới gần, không thể bỏ lỡ. Một bàn thắng tuyệt vời.
Đó là một chân sút đẳng cấp, một cơ hội không thể tuyệt vời hơn. Manchester City đã vươn lên dẫn trước từ tình huống ra bóng. Bellingham.
Như vậy là bóng đã một cú sút.
Đó là bàn thắng cho Manchester City.
Vâng, bàn thắng đầu tiên đã đem đến sự tự tin cho cầu thủ này. Và rồi, một lẽ tất nhiên, bàn thứ hai đã tới. Một bàn thắng có sự cộng hưởng của yếu tố may mắn khi nó đã đập trúng sang ngang. Rodrigo. Và giờ họ tổ chức tình huống phản công. Một cú áp trong ngày hôm nay, một ngày thi đấu hoàn hảo tới lúc này.
Bàn thắng đã được ghi.